JD Vance, the vice presidential candidate of Donald Trump, gave an interview to New York Times. It was a 52-minute long interview, but within that, they also discussed about childless cat ladies. Up until now, I have not commented on this because it was all about either politics or JD Vance's random and rude comments, or on the other side, its caricature. But this time, we saw a serious insight into JD Vance's thought on this matter. He was asked about this, and let's see what he said.
What I was definitely trying to illustrate in, ultimately a very inarticulate way is that I do think that our country has become almost pathologically anti-child.
Anti child can mean two things. It could either be something against existing children or it could be something against potential children. Also, what does pathologically mean here? And is it only America which is anti child? And has it become anti child only now? These are the questions that come to mind.
I put this in a couple of different ways, right? So there's one, it was actually when I was in law school. It was on a train between New York and New Haven. I think I was doing like law firm interviews or something. And obviously I didn't have kids then. And there's this young girl gets on the train. She's probably 21 or 22. She's, you know, young black female, clearly I could tell by the way she was dressed. She didn't have a whole lot of money. She had a couple of kids with her. And you know, I remember like just watching her and thinking like this is a really unbelievably patient mother. I mean, for being literally younger than I was, the reason I sort of noticed her is because her kids, like a lot of kids that age, are complete disasters, especially on public transportation. They turn it up to 11, but she was being so patient. But then, like everybody around her was also noticing the kids being misbehaved, and they were so angry, and they were and sighing and staring every time her 2-year-old made a noise. And that was sort of a moment that kind of stuck with me. And then, of course, I've had similar experiences riding with my own kids on various modes of public transportation. And again, it just sort of hit me like, okay, this is really, really bad. This thing that we do where we make motherhood or fatherhood, or there's this, again, I do think that there's like this pathological frustration with children that just is a new thing in American society. I think it's very dark.
Okay, so clearly he is talking about treatment of existing children. Was his example really a representative of this so called anti child culture? It is quite often that people get frustrated of misbehaving children, including the parents of the children who are misbehaving. I don't see how that is pathologically anti child. And this is not just in America, it is seen all over the world, even in other species. So I have doubt if this is something that's happening only now. And it's not the attitude of others that is making motherhood and fatherhood hard. It is the children whose inherent nature makes parenthood hard. I'm not saying that we should blame children for that. It's not their fault, but they are the reason why parenthood is so hard. And even if there are some people who just dislike children and remain child free for that reason, that is a minority within a minority of child free people. Generalizing this to an entire country like America is misplaced, especially when you are expecting its citizens to vote for you.
I think you see it sometimes in the political conversation, people saying, well, maybe we shouldn't have kids because of climate change.
So now JD changes the track on to not having new children, which is different than how we treat existing children.
When I've used this word sociopathic, like that, I think is a very deranged idea. The idea that you shouldn't have a family because of concerns over climate change.
First of all, not having children does not mean not having a family. His opponent Kamala Harris sets a nice example for this. But there are many things you can do to have a family. Adopt existing children, even have non humans as part of your family. The notion of a standard traditional family of a man and a woman who have sex and create children is not bad in and of itself, but it is just one of the many models of having family.
The idea that you shouldn't have a family because of concerns over climate change doesn't mean you can't worry about climate change, but in the focus on childless cat ladies, we
So are you
missed, I
saying
think,
that
the substance that
women who
we
don't want to
missed the
have
substance
children,
of what I said.
sorry, I just want to clarify something. So women who
Please.
don't have children because they're worried about climate change, that's sociopathic?
There are a few words we should look carefully. pathological, sociopathic, deranged idea, and of course, anti child. Pathological refers to a clinically identified disorder, like something which your doctor would recognize as worthy of treatment. The idea that we should not bring new children into this world is not pathological disorder by any standards. It's a philosophical idea. Sociopathic and deranged. Now, even though climate change is not my reason for antinatalism, it certainly is not sociopathic and deranged. If someone thinks about environmental degradation and would not want to bring another child into it, how is that deranged? And when that child would be born, it would also be contributing to the ongoing climate change. So, not bringing that child here, how is that sociopathic? You could argue that climate change is not a right reason to not have children. But if that is your reason to not have children, that does not automatically make you sociopathic and deranged, because your concern is out of empathy towards those who are already existing and are suffering due to climate change and towards the suffering of the potential child. So it is certainly not sociopathic and deranged. If anything, it is philanthropic.
I mean, bringing life into the world has totally transformed the way that I think about myself, the way that I think about my wife, the way that I mean, you watch your grandparents interact with grandchildren. It is like a transformatively positive and good thing for there to be children in the world.
So it's good for me. It's good for the already existing world. But where's the consideration for the child who will have to go through suffering in their life? You are using children as a means to your ends, for your personal growth, for your desires for the world to be a better place, while ignoring the fact that that child that you're going to create will have to go through suffering in life before their certain death. This is anti child. It is this pro natalist culture of using children as instruments to satisfy our desires is what is anti child. JD Vance, in that sense, is anti child and not those who have decided not to have children. From America to Russia. Last week, Lawrence made a video talking about Russia's intended ban on child free propaganda. Well, the news is that the bill to ban child free propaganda has passed Russia's lower house called the Duma with overwhelming support. According to the Speaker of the House, Vyacheslav Volodin, it is important to protect people, primarily the younger generation, from having the ideology of childlessness imposed on them on the internet, in the media, in movies, and in advertising. Basically, don't let them decide for themselves, keep them in dark. There's already some reactions coming out of Russia on this. Olga Suvorova, for example, who is a rights activist for victims of domestic violence, says women are being essentially turned into vessels of bearing children, not taking into account their circumstances, their motivations, and whether they aspire to have a career or family. Pretty dim situation over there. And as Lawrence hinted in his video, the likes of JD Vance are just a milder version of this tendency to dictate upon people's reproductive freedoms. Okay, so from Russia into the UK, if you're looking out for a course in philosophy and happen to be near Oxford University, there is a new course, Ethics of the Beginning and End of Life. It covers various topics around life and death, like natural reproduction, IVF, abortion, embryo destruction, right to die, stem cell research, definition of brain dead, and its implications and so on. Of course, this is not directly antinatalism course, but all of these topics inform many aspects of antinatalism. The course is part of a larger master's in studies degree in philosophy, but also can be taken as a standalone course. I'll include the link in the description. Nice pro-natalist article was published in the New York Times by a conservative natalist, David French. America needs more children. JD Vance's shame game won't get us there. It referred to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who recently said that Kamala Harris does not have any children and that's why she is not humble. By the way, she said this while sitting beside the most humble man ever in the history of humbleness. Or, as he himself might put it, the biggest humble man ever, who has had many children with many women and has paid hush money to porn stars. Anyway, the article also refers to Malcolm Collins, who describes people who don't want to have children as purest forms of evil. And then, of course, JD Vance and his childless cat lady comments. David's point is shaming people is not going to solve the problem of low fertility. If you want people to have more kids, you need to be on their side and encourage them instead of shaming them. Now, I think there's a leaf to draw for antinatalists from this very pro natalist article. I mean, if you go on any antinatalist internet forums, you would find a lot of shaming of people who have kids, and that's not helpful either. I get the anger antinatalists feel towards those who bring children into this world, but that anger will have to be channelized into something creative and into encouraging people to see what they're doing. And I know this is easier said than done, but as antinatalists, we should be humble. I mean, really humble, not the fake ones like these. There was an article on firstthings.com by Mary Harrington about the recent book What Are Children For? On Ambivalence and Choice by Anastasia Berg and Rachel Weissman. It's a long article with a lot of ornamental and figurative language, but with very little substance in it. The idea is simple. There's a contradiction between absolute liberalism and parenting. Absolute liberalism recognizes individual freedom, rejects authority and hierarchies. And so you are not allowed to tell others what they should be doing. It's up to them, it's their own personal decision. But at the same time, parenting involves maintaining some authority and hierarchy between the parent and the child. This is not the first time this has been brought up, by the way. Julio Cabrera's argument of parental manipulation runs on similar lines, and Amanda Sukanik and Mati Hairi's postnatal imposition also comes to mind. This is also called as childism by some antinatalist authors. The article talks about some liberal parental styles in which Weisman grew up, especially what is called as acceptance parenting, where parents are mere enablers for children. The life decisions ultimately have to be taken by the children themselves. Parents continue to support their children, whatever path they take, as long as they are happy. But here's the catch: the children aren't even provided the definition of happiness, they have to figure that out themselves. So, unlike the conservative parenting, the children of acceptance parenting don't have any constraints to rebel against and do not have any guardrails to take the support from. This sounds like a free floating world, and the authors seem to be in search of some anchor to their life. That anchor has to require some real commitment. It has to be irreversible, sort of guarantees stability, and guarantees that there is no chance of returning back to this free floating world. In a way, this anchor restrains you, gives meaning to your life. It sort of shapes your life. That's why the article says affirming life thus means accepting that what gives a particular life its shape are those aspects that are not wholly optional. This is the cure for the moral void that Weisman and Burke have been looking for to liberate themselves from the tyranny of absolute liberalism. This forms the justification for having children. It is irreversible, it needs commitment, it puts constraints on you, and so in the process shapes your life into forming something like a mother or a father. The authors of the book use continuation of species as an added weight onto this anchor, to feel that they are indeed doing something meaningful beyond themselves to save our species from going extinct. This article concludes by generalizing this to the entire generation which was brought up in similar moral free float, left to form themselves. While talking about their children, the children of this free floating generation, it says that they will liberate their children from the terrible obligation of forming themselves. Sounds very poetic? Yes, but makes no logical sense. Have a look at this sentence again. They, as in this generation, will liberate their children from the terrible obligation of forming themselves. This is like first trapping someone in a cage and then opening the cage and then taking credit for liberating them. What's the point? There are no unborn children in need of liberation from anything. What's the point of having them and then trying to somehow liberate them? Poetic allegories are not ethical justifications, they're just word clouds to hide behind and masturbate your minds. Karim Akerma had a short blog entry on his antinatalism blog about denatalistic fears. He points out to an interesting contradiction. With the declining birth rates, eventually there'll be declining populations. And if fewer people on this planet means life is going to be worse, why bring more people into this worse condition? You might argue that bringing new people is the remedy to this worsening situation, but it's not like a flip switch. Fertility rates would not rise overnight, and the new armies of labor for the health sector would have to be replenished first. So, if you want to prevent people experiencing the reputed evils of aging populations with increasing pressure on health systems, then stop producing people. In other words, break this endless cycle of creating and using people to save people. American Philosophical Association is an organization to promote philosophy as a discipline and a profession. Amanda Suknick and Mati Hairi have published a blog in their bioethics section, The Philosophy to End All Philosophy. They talk about antinatalism in general and challenges about defining the term. I mean, so many antinatalists have so many different flavors of definitions of antinatalism. The recently published book, Antinatalism, Extinction, and the End of Procreative Self Corruption, which walks through the history of antinatalism in the Western philosophical context and its intersection with the religions at the time, is also mentioned. The blog explains one of the core ideas of the book. Most of the ancient Western philosophy, or at least the pro natalist parts of it, have actually been a reaction to underlying antinatalist sentiments throughout the history. The authors argue that Western philosophy can, in fact, be seen as an endless struggle against antinatalism. Every time life's meaninglessness seriously enters intellectual conversation, philosophers come to rescue with new fairy tales. There is also an open and honest acceptance of extinction as a consequence of the methodical end of reproduction. Amanda and Mati have argued that given many generations, there would be at least one child who has to go through horrible suffering. That child is akin to the child in the story of the one who walked away from Omelas. All of the ancestors of that unfortunate child are like the happy citizens of that Omela's town benefiting from the suffering of the child, which is why they say that by having children, parents fall prey to moral self corruption, as in indulging in deeply unethical action of continuing to benefit from suffering child. And finally, there is a passing reference to 13 buttons they propose in the book which could shape future of antinatalism. Some notable videos, and this is not an exhaustive list, it's just that there are so many videos coming about antinatalism. I cannot watch all of them, which is actually a good problem to have. So here's the one that I have noticed. Danny Shine was out on the streets of London telling people why sex was a tragedy in his signature comic fashion. A channel called Inner Harmony had a nice AI voiceover stock footage video explaining connections of Schopenhauer's thoughts on antinatalism. There was a video slash tutorial in Hindi slash Urdu. They're very similar languages, by the way, explaining antinatalism, although I felt the video was too short and did not cover all arguments properly.